Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out Action Comics issue 1070 by Mark Waid, Clayton Henry, Mariko Tamaki, and Skylar Partridge. After the events of Absolute Power, Mark Waid jumps onto Action Comics and turns it back into a weekly series for a little bit, with the story taking place in the 52 days between Absolute Power issue 4 and the beginning of DC's All-In Special. Our story begins in the newly reconstructed Fortress of Solitude, where the original Phantom Zone projector blasts open, spewing forth a horrifying homunculus made of 3 phantoms from the zone, unleashing them onto the Earth. Superman, meanwhile, meets with Jimmy Olsen, who has put himself in kind of a precarious position in order to get some pictures of the city's comptroller taking bribes in exchange for financial information. Supes, of course, reminds his friends that no story is worth his life, and he needs to be a little bit more careful, more so now since it's his birthday next week. The friends' conversation is interrupted by something blasting its way through Metropolis, so Superman springs into action, finding the strange phantom being who escaped the fortress has made its way into the city of tomorrow. I've really missed Waid's inner monologues for Clark. He writes him so damn well, and it's the little things he gets about the character and makes him go through, makes him feel real, like reminding himself that, today is Sunday, so the city won't be as busy as it usually is, and all of the office buildings will be empty, which is lucky because the homunculus that he's fighting ends up crashing through one of these office buildings. Clark also puts his investigative journalist skills to good use and tries to deduce what this creature is and where it came from, all while not outwardly attacking it. He's just kind of keeping it at bay until he understands what it is and how to deal with it. It's a very Superman thing to do that I think a lot of writers don't seem to get, and I like that Waid, who has written the character so much over the many decades he's been writing comics, just clicks right on into that. Clark immediately recognizes the 3 beings who have been fused together as Phantom Zone prisoners, and to make matters worse, they are all Kryptonian, meaning they have the same powers he does under a yellow sun, and are overcome with a berserker rage thanks to the immense pain they feel from being fused together, so they are basically unstoppable and 3 times as powerful as Superman. Luckily, Clark is assisted by his cousin Supergirl, who arrives in the nick of time to prevent the Phantom Zoners from killing Clark. Superman and Supergirl battle the monster for over an hour, but the heroes find themselves at a big disadvantage, since while they are fighting it, they also have to deal with rescuing people in the streets or stopping the creature from attacking nearby onlookers. Luckily, Superman comes up with a plan that might actually stop the being, but it's one that, if not done right, could lead to all of them dying. Superman leaves the battle and heads to Dalol, a region in Ethiopia where, among the superheated geysers in the rocks below, he has hidden a container with gold kryptonite in it. It's at this point that Waid uses this as an opportunity to kind of reiterate what kryptonite is for maybe people who aren't reading it, because if you haven't guessed already, this is kind of a great jumping on point. This is the beginning of a new arc. It's a weekly book now. It's a fantastic time to jump onto comics now, thanks to DC's All-In initiative, kind of resetting most of these books and giving them either a fresh new creative team or just starting a new story like we are here with Waid. And here he goes over like what kryptonite does with, green obviously weakening Superman, not killing him unless there is quite a fair bit of it, in which case it can lead to him dying. Then there's red kryptonite, which causes mutations, not feeding Superman's inhibitions like it does in Smallville, which I'm sure a lot of people will recognize red kryptonite from, but it doesn't do what it does in that show at all. In the comics, it horrifically changes Superman's DNA, and we've seen things over the years where he becomes like a giant ant and just weird looking aliens. It's very grotesque. The last kryptonite Waid talks about is the gold kryptonite, which completely removes a Kryptonian's powers for good, with no chance of them ever coming back. Now, I really like how Waid sells the implications of the gold K. It's not something Superman takes very lightly, and even hates the idea that he has to resort to even just thinking about using it, knowing that he and Kara could easily lose their powers if they're exposed for even a second to the mineral, so he has to be very careful with it. Superman returns to the fight, but is is battered away by the being before he can use the gold K, with the mineral falling into the hands of Jimmy below as Kara and Clark are forced to help stabilize the Metropolis Bridge. Jimmy then does something insanely brave and stupid. He decides to cause a distraction, activating his signal watch and causing the monster to feel immense pain, causing it to make a beeline right for him, which allows him to blast it with the gold kryptonite, keeping Superman and Kara at a safe distance. Once the being is hit by the gold kryptonite, it takes its powers and knocks the being out cold, allowing Superman to take it back down to the bottled city of Kandor. With the chaos dying down, we finally get some answers to what's really going on here, as all throughout the fight the monster was saying something in Kryptonese, and Kara, thanks to knowing the language quite well, reveals that it was asking the heroes to kill it, revealing that it was in immense pain and it was aware of what it had become and just wanted to die. On top of that revelation, Wade begins tying it back into his World's Finest stories and Action Comics backup he did a few months ago, as Superman assembles the Super Family at the fortress, revealing to them that the Kandorian Druga, who had helped him in those earlier stories, specifically the World's Finest one I believe, told him that after being woken during the events of Absolute Power, where the Kandorians were used to battle the Amazos ever so briefly, they can now no longer communicate with the Phantom Zone. And Dryger thinks that this is not an accident either and something has happened. Wade does a good job tying all of these different plots from World's Finest, Absolute Power, his Action Comics stuff that he did a few months back. He ties it all together really nicely. And I love that he's made this through line across all of these stories for Superman, connecting them all together. And as someone who's read all of these books and has been following this story, it's thoroughly rewarding, and I'm excited to see it begin to get laid out here in proper. And it's also really reader friendly because you don't have to have read those stories at all to understand what's going on. It's all explained here quite well. If you want to go back and read those stories, you definitely should, because they are excellent stories on their own merits, and without the connections they are just fantastic Superman and Batman related stories. Superman soon reveals that the zone is going through some changes, and since the time his father discovered it, it has grown much harsher, developing its own geography and laws of physics. It's because of this Superman decides it's time he enters the zone and find out what is actually going on there and what's caused these beings to become fused together and escape the zone. Before leaving though, he entrusts the safety of the world to Supergirl. No small feat, and I do like, instead of hearing her objections, because of course Kara would not think that she is best suited for this, or she has like her own missions to do. I like that Clark doesn't want to hear any of that sort of stuff. He doesn't want to hear any objections, and he's kind of put his foot down that no, she is in charge while he is away, which is really interesting because she never really gets put in charge like this, and I quite like that Wade did that. Now obviously, while Superman is putting on a face to assure his family that everything is okay, Lois can see right through it, knowing Clark is actually frightened to be going into the Phantom Zone, and rightly so, since as he puts it, it gives off a very ominous and disorientating feel to him. He gets the wrong type of vibes from this zone and doesn't know how to deal with that sort of stuff because it's so unlike anything that he has ever really dealt with before. In classic Superman fashion though, Clark still wants to head inside since he knows the prisoners in there are suffering, and even convicted criminals deserve a chance to be saved and to not undergo the same suffering that befell the 3 Kryptonians from before. Lois reminds Clark he has his recall device should he need it, as he is blasted into the zone, but he knows he won't be very long and everything's going to be just fine. But little does he know, a group of heavily armed zoners are waiting for their jailer to finally return to them. In the book's backup, Mariko Tamaki focuses on Supergirl, who begins a rather interesting journey starting at the United Planets, where Kara is trying to track down something, getting what she needs from the receptionist before using her recent dream type powers that she got via Power Girl and Omen, and it was a whole thing. It was a whole thing in Lazarus Planet and all that sort of stuff. But she was able to use these powers to wipe the memory of the United Planets representative and make it so that she was never actually there. Kara returns home, where she has John Henry build her a ship to her exact specifications, And John Henry is quick to remind Kara that this ship is only good for a one-way trip, and it's something that Kara doesn't really seem to mind. And again, she uses her powers to wipe John Henry's memory as well, as she takes the devices from him. Now, not a lot is actually explained across this backup, but I quite like that. It kind of fits in with this whole weird situation we find Kara in, where she's like wiping people's memory and making them forget things. So I like that we're not told overly of like what's happening. We're just kind of dropped on into it and just kind of have to like pick out things that kind of might make sense. And I guess we're going to find out obviously in the coming issues, but Tamaki builds great tension throughout this issue as it just keeps ramping up with her sort of covering her tracks and, erasing the memories of people she knows and loves just so they don't know where she is going or what she is up to. It's very unlike Kara, and I'm really intrigued to see what's going on. Like, is this mind controlling? Is something switched in her mind? Is she turning evil? Like, what is going on? There's so many different ways you can take it, and I'm really intrigued to see where Tamaki does take it. We do get a sliver of context, and again, this is something that could also just be like an illusion or just something that is made up, as it's revealed that Superman is the one who tasks her with a mission that will see her head away from Earth and into deep, deep space, and it's something that Superman doesn't even want to send Kara on, but knows that she is the only one who can do this. So Kara readies herself and gets into her ship, but before she can leave, she is interrupted by Power Girl, who knows something is going on with Kara, but can't figure out what it is, and Kara can't tell her and won't take her with her, trying to wipe her multiversal doppelganger's mind before she figures out a little too much than what she's meant to. But Paige, who has the same powers as Kara, blocks Kara's power. However, Kara proves too much, blasts Paige and knocks her out before leaving, taking her memory with her. Kara jumps into hyperspace and into the far universe to continue her mission, whatever that may be, but I'm hooked. Everything in this little backup just hooked me, and I'm so intrigued what could possibly be sending Supergirl to the far side of the universe for. And you do keep seeing a strange round shape show up every now and then. She sees it in the eyes of people, and it opens the issue, just a big one-page spread of this weird round symbol, which I guess is representative of like a planet, maybe a planet in space. That's how I took it. And just by looking at the design of it and how it looks very like tech based, it's got all these like circuitry covering it, makes me think of something like Warworld. And could this be her going to Warworld? Could this be like a wrap up of the Philip Kennedy Johnson stuff with Warworld, all the stuff he did in the Warworld saga? Who knows? Tamaki has set up a really interesting mystery here, and I'm looking forward to exploring it. Action Comics issue 1060 kicked off Mark Waid's weekly story with a bang. Jumping right into the action and sending Superman off on an adventure Waid has been laying the ground for throughout his work on World's Finest and even more recently in Absolute Power. I'm excited to finally get to go back into the Phantom Zone and explore what's come of the zone in the last couple of years, since it feels like an age since we've had a story solely set in the zone and dedicated to exploring it. Along with that, we get a very cool backup story by Mariko Tamaki that sets out a foundation for a very interesting mystery for Supergirl to get caught up in, and a mystery that's heading into space, something Supergirl seldom does. So it's a very interesting and refreshing new setting and situation to put Supergirl in. I'm going to give this issue a 9 out of 10.